an original MCM production.
And on behalf of the League, our board, our members, we welcome all of you here this morning for a really important topic. We're glad you're here. And the League of Women Voters is nonpartisan. We don't support any political party or candidate. Our membership is open to men and women. And we've been around since 1920. So if you want to know a little bit more, I have not personally been around since 1920, but the League has. If you'd like more information, we have our program calendar, our membership brochure, and a little brochure that has information about the League, as well as our other co-sponsoring groups. So make sure you visit the tables out in the hall. And with that, let's get started. We're glad you're here.
I would like to make a few remarks as to how we in the League arrived at this program. Back in the last 2 years, our committee, the Natural Resources Committee, has been focused on the infrastructure in the United States. We have worked with the American Society of Civil Engineers for a couple years and have had a total of 5 presentations and learned that the infrastructure in the United States gets an overall grade of D+. Basically, infrastructure includes things like levees, dams, water supply systems, rail, bridges, and roads, and those are among the 16 categories. Our committee members read that a bridge of questionable structural integrity carried long oil trains of highly volatile and explosive Bakken crude oil through downtown Milwaukee. That was of great concern to us, and we asked questions about risk to people, risk to our rivers, to Lake Michigan, and to the infrastructure of our area, all of the communities in Milwaukee County, especially the 7 through which this rail line proceeds. We wondered, are Milwaukee County communities prepared to deal with an oil train accident, whether it's a spill, a fire, or an explosion? And so this morning, we hope to address, at least begin to address, these issues. And I will now turn the program over to our first group, Citizens Acting for Rail Safety, Milwaukee Area. Their topic is assessing the risks and preventing disaster, not presenting. That's what we hope to avoid. Okay, immediately following them, we will proceed to 2 videos, one from Tammy Baldwin and one from Gwen Moore, very brief videos. And then Jill Billings in the front row in the bright blue jacket will speak to us about her efforts to address the issue in Wisconsin. So, Brian and Eric?
I'd like to start with a 1-minute video right here.
2 trains collide in a fiery crash in North Dakota.
In November, a 90-car train derailed in Alabama. In a derailment in Quebec last July, killed 47 people.
A parked train came loose, picked up speed, roared off the tracks, and exploded in the middle of the night. Burnt rail tankers are still steaming in the heart of Megantic, Quebec.
Without our consent or even notification, Wisconsin has become one of the busiest routes for dangerous oil train traffic in the nation. That was a quote from Senator Tammy Baldwin. Without our consent or even notification, I think that's what brings us here today. I'm here to show you that the crude oil train catastrophes that have happened, what might happen, so we can prevent it from happening here or anywhere else. As you see in the video, this is the oil train explosion in Castleton, North Dakota in 2013. Just to put this picture in perspective, here's a train. It's a 40-story explosion plume. This is another explosion that happened in 2013 in Megantic, Quebec. It consumed the town. It was a Saturday night. People were out in the town. Explosion happened. Many of these people, all of these people were killed. Some of these people were asleep in their homes. A number of these people were vaporized. No remains could be found. The fires went into, they burned, it went into the Lake Megantic. The fires went into the sewer system, and through the sewer system it popped up all over the city, setting the entire city on fire. And that very train that blew up Lac Megantic came through Milwaukee. It came through these train tracks right through downtown Milwaukee. This is a picture taken out of my living room window. In the situation where you have an oil train explosion or derailment, the U.S. Department of Transportation has the evacuation zone, the blast zone at half a mile. Is what you see here. What you see here in the red? That's a half-mile radius around the oil-carrying train tracks. It also has a potential impact zone of 1 mile, which is this yellow outline, what you see going through the city. And I think this concerns a lot of people. I think it concerns we counted about 90,000 people in the city of Milwaukee that lives in the blast zone. And it should concern all of us sitting here today because we are meeting here in the blast zone. I didn't pick this location, somebody did. So here's our city. You can see a lot of waterways coming through here. If we superimpose that blast zone through the middle of the city, it looks like this. Marquette University, the Potawatomi, the Harley-Davidson Museum. You have MIAD, the public market. I live here. I think that's part of the reason why I'm here. Just sitting at home, minding my own business, and then these oil trains started coming through. And it makes you wonder. This is the bridge at 1st and Oregon Street near downtown Milwaukee. And it's a pretty rusty bridge. Here you can see one of the I-beams with a hole totally eaten through. And this is what it's like to live in the blast zone. We have a resident artist. She's here somewhere. There, in the back. And this is what it's like. Every night when you sleep and the train comes by and wakes you up, this is kind of what you think about. So Lac Megantic tragedy in 2013 was just the beginning of an exponential increase in number of oil trains coming through the entire North America. The National Transport Safety Board estimates about 10 oil train derailments per year. As you can see, that this is a pretty recent phenomenon for this extreme form of transport, and it had a really bad start, which is Lac Megantic. So why does it happen? First of all, the material is not safe. The crude oil coming out of the Bakken oil fields in North Dakota is not your regular crude oil. It's twice as much more volatile than the regular crude oil. It has a flash point of 70 degrees Fahrenheit. It's corrosive. It's way more corrosive than any of the oil coming out of the ground. It has high sulfur content. The tank cars are not designed for flammables. Most of the DOT 111 tank cars out there are food grade for transporting food. There's been a sharp increase, as you can see by the calendar, number and also length of oil trains. There's definitely a lack of transparency in the industry, in the entire industry, the rail industry and the oil industry, and there's also inadequate government regulations. Here's what it looks like when an oil train derails. The tankers kind of just roll off the tracks, roll off the wheels, detach from the wheels, like the cheap soda cans, and they will puncture. The oil will come out, the fumes, the aerated fumes will come out, it'll catch the ignition source, it'll blow up. We can't wait for this to happen. A few months ago, an oil train derailed in Watertown. The oil train ran to a maintenance building. The building was filled up with these oil fumes. And I think the brave firefighters actually rushed into the building and shut off a transformer and also a generator. Otherwise, the town would have gone up. And Watertown's only about an hour away from us. So our brave firefighters and emergency personnel should never be put in a position to have to put out fires like these. We also live in a unique city of water. In Milwaukee and in Wisconsin is water city, as I'm starting to learn. It's great. This is a derailment that happened in Lynchburg, Virginia. The oil tankers derailed. They fell into the water. They caught fire. They exploded, setting the river on fire, the James River. And after the fires are out, there's an oil spill that went into the river that's sustained. So it's difficult to get the stuff out of the water. Here's another picture of what happened in Mobile River in Alabama. Here's another picture of the oil train going through a swing bridge that swings open when the boat comes through and swings closed when the train comes by, and at the confluence of our great Milwaukee River and Menominee Rivers. So we live in this unique city of rivers and lakes. It's up to us to protect these precious waters. We are citizens acting for rail safety, and we have chapters organizing in Milwaukee, Watertown, Twin Cities, and La Crosse. So here's my colleague, Eric Hansen, to talk about the lack of transparency surrounding this extreme form of transportation.
Thank you, Brian. How's my voice? Is it carrying through the room? Okay. I was asked to prepare a few comments just on citizens' right to know and the lack of information that often accompanies oil train traffic. At the heart of this discussion is a citizen's right to know and a right to object to ill-advised schemes that threaten our health and safety, to say safely or not at all. A right to know what is coming down the railroad tracks and into our neighborhoods. A right to know the condition of the railroad tracks and bridges in our community. A right to know that railroad track defects will be addressed promptly. Investigators believe the Lynchburg, Virginia derailment and fire that Brian highlighted just a few minutes ago was caused by a defect in the track that was detected the day before the accident. Notably, the railroad scheduled repair for 2 days later, and the oil train proceeded and derailed before that repair was implemented. Track failures cause most derailments. Rails harden with use and can become brittle. The sheer weight of oil trains increases the stress on railroad rails. This past year, Brian and I attended and testified at hearings held by the Milwaukee City Council. After public attention focused on the First Street Railroad Bridge, that's the one that's right next to where Brian lives, Canadian Pacific Railroad engineers inspected that bridge last spring, and the city engineer requested a copy of that inspection. The railroad refused to share the report. Public pressure grew. In theory, a process has now been set up by the Federal Railroad Administration, a process which would allow public review of the bridge inspection. Worth noting, inspection reports for highway bridges are public. We still have not seen the First Street Bridge inspection report. Brian has a right to see that report. You have a right to see that report. We have a right to see that report. And I'll just add that it's not just Brian and his the other people in that building living next door, but the many, many motorists, it could be 30, 40,000 a week pass under that bridge. It's a very busy street. Citizens have a right to know the criteria railroads use when making routing decisions. Question: why do the railroads choose to run dangerous crude oil cargo through populated areas and alongside vital water resources? Citizens have a right to expect government to prevent unsafe behavior, especially when it's systemic unsafe behavior, not just address the damages. It is an illusion to think that the federal government is exercising effective due diligence on crude oil train traffic. It is not, by its own admission. A recent audit of the Federal Railroad Administration, and this was released just 2 weeks ago in late February, by the Department of Transportation's Inspector General, is alarming. Essentially, that audit cites the danger of oil trains and the vast increase in traffic and the Megantic disaster, and then goes on to describe FRA as lacking any coherent oversight of that traffic. FRA has not adequately evaluated the risks of moving crude oil by train, especially through population centers. In addition, the audit cites a notable lack of criminal charges for violations when they would be warranted. Citizens have a right to know about the level of insurance railroads such as Canadian Pacific have to cover damages from an oil train incident. The potential damage, and this is not pie in the sky, I mean, this is very easily estimated. The potential damage to Milwaukee's water resources and infrastructure is considerable. For example, decades of clean water efforts are now at risk. As we look at prevention, it only makes sense to note that oil train traffic reflects the dynamics of an outdated energy product and the behavior of an oil industry that is stuck in yesterday. The know-how now exists to switch our economy to clean, renewable energy and get our discussion beyond oil trains, beyond the threat that they represent not only to our community health and safety, but to our planet's health and safety. It is long past time for the oil industry to become a clean energy industry and to position railroads to be part of our clean energy future. We are hardly alone in our concerns about crude oil trains. Citizens acting for rail safety is part of a broad regional and national network of citizens and elected officials working to respond to the crude oil train threat. And let me just add that Brian and I were part of the first ever oil train response national conference in Pittsburgh last November, and we met many of the elected officials and citizens that we've been on conference calls repeatedly. It was inspiring. Crude oil by rail is not an idea that stands up in the light of day. When crude oil by rail is subject to a rigorous process of public debate on its merits, it does not receive public support. Citizens and local officials are working to block attempts to build terminals for crude oil trains in Albany, New York, as well as California and the Pacific Northwest. They do not want to see infrastructure built that would increase the traffic levels of crude oil trains through their communities and through other communities. In the final analysis, this is a discussion about what we want our communities to be and whether we will allow oil trains to threaten the clean water, infrastructure, and healthy communities that we have worked for, safely or not at all. This ends the portion of the program assigned to citizens acting for rail safety. We look forward to the other presentations and to your questions. At this time, I would like to introduce Ben Juarez, Regional Representative for Senator Tammy Baldwin.
We will now proceed with two videos, one from Senator Baldwin and one from Representative Gwen Moore. Very brief videos on the issue of rail carrying Bakken crude oil that's highly explosive.
Hi, I'm U.S. Senator Tammy Baldwin. I'm so glad to know that you, the League of Women Voters of Milwaukee County, are also focusing on the growing danger posed by trains carrying volatile crude oil through Wisconsin. I've been sounding the alarm for 2 years on the need to put in place strong rail safety reforms. It's critical that appropriate safety measures are in place to reduce the risk of deadly accidents and that our emergency personnel have the training and resources they need to respond in case of a tragedy. That's why I've been traveling around the state to join local first responders and concerned citizens such as yourselves in a call to action on dangerous oil trains. Recently, the FAST Act, a bipartisan transportation bill, became law. The FAST Act includes reforms that I've been fighting for to improve safety, transparency, and better communication between the railroads and local first responders and communities. Wisconsin first responders should be applauded for their reaction to last year's derailments, but railroad companies need to do more. We need to strengthen communication between railroads and local communities before an accident occurs. Railroads must let our first responders know what is moving through their communities beforehand. We also need to make railroads share infrastructure inspection reports with local elected officials. This law will make that happen, and I'm committed to ensuring that these provisions are implemented efficiently and as soon as possible. I am so grateful to the first responders and local officials and advocates like the League of Women Voters of Milwaukee County and citizens acting for rail safety, who have spoken out and demanded action to keep our Wisconsin communities along oil train routes safe. I am proud to be your partner in the United States Senate. Thank you.
In recent years, there's been a tremendous increase in the amount of crude oil traveling by rail through our communities. In just a few years, railroads went from moving 10,000 carloads of oil by rail to over 500,000 carloads. Over 1 million barrels of oil per day travel through urban and rural neighborhoods in our nation. I share your concerns that with this increase in oil by rail traffic comes an increased risk of derailment, which would be catastrophic in a highly populated area like Milwaukee. In Congress, I've advocated for a series of measures to protect my constituents from the dangers posed by these trains, including boosting funding for federal oversight of oil trains, strengthening resources to carry out more federal inspections of track, and supporting the creation of a nationwide bridge inventory to document the age of rail bridges and the date of their last inspection. These are just a few of the ways we can strengthen the federal government's role in protecting our communities. I look forward to continuing to work with our partners in Wisconsin and Washington to ensure the continued safety of our city and its citizens. And I'd like to thank the League of Women Voters for putting on this important event.
Thank you. We will now turn to Jill Billings, who is the representative from the 95th Assembly District in Wisconsin. It covers La Crosse and the immediate area around La Crosse. Jill has been in the state legislature since 2012, am I right? 2011, okay. And being from La Crosse, she is obviously quite concerned about the oil trains that travel through and sometimes park on rail in La Crosse. Welcome, Jill Billings, please.
Thank you. Thank you and good morning. You might be wondering, what is a legislator from all the way across the state in La Crosse doing here in Milwaukee on a Saturday morning? And I rest that at the feet of my colleague and my friend from the Assembly, Evan Goyke. He's here today. Evan, are you Representative Goyke? There he is. He invited me to come after the league contacted him about rail safety. And I'm happy to be here because I understand, even though I'm on the opposite side of the state, that Milwaukee is so important to our state, as goes the health of Milwaukee, goes the health of our state, I always say. And so I'm happy to be here, and he's also going to be in La Crosse next week, so it's nice to kind of go across. I really I enjoy working with the Milwaukee delegation as a total, especially. I've had a great experience with Representative LaTanya Johnson this last year, working on some human trafficking legislation. And if you'd ever like to invite us back to talk about sex trafficking of children in Wisconsin, two women on opposite sides of the state, we both understand the importance of that issue and have gotten some legislation through this last session, which is very promising to help kids in Wisconsin. I'm like the little gnat that's in the ear of people. I never give up. And I love working with LaTanya because I'm knocking on doors and I never stop. I'm the gnat. And then she comes in like the trumpet. She's got such a beautiful voice for this area. And so she couldn't make it today, but she sends her greetings also. So I got involved in rail safety in large part because of my local CARS group in La Crosse. La Crosse is on the Mississippi River Valley. So we've got bluffs on one side, and then a little bit of plain, and then we've got the river. So we're kind of a north-south city. And the trains run right through the heart of my district like they do here in Milwaukee. And they run up and down both sides of the river. So they run up and down the Minnesota side of the river where I am and up and down the Wisconsin side of the river. And the train, Burlington Northern Santa Fe, which is one of the rails that goes through my district, they added an extra track. Now this track goes through the backyards of a lot of my friends who noticed that the longer, faster, heavier trains are chugging through and creating, there are people who couldn't sleep at night. It was rocking their houses. They noticed more plaster damage. They noticed they had to readjust their pictures more often on their walls because of the trains that were coming in, those longer, faster, heavier trains. And so they said, can we do something about this? Now that there's a second track that's coming through, we're concerned about safety. And in fact, there were a couple of derailments that are more recent that weren't added up here along in my area. And as I started researching what we could do for rail safety, I looked at a model that's been in effect in Minnesota since the summer of 2014. And my feeling is, can't people on our side of the Mississippi be as safe as the people on the other side of the Mississippi? Thank you. So we worked on this legislation at the same time that Senator Baldwin, Congressman Kind in my area, have worked on the federal level, and I so appreciate the work that they have done. Senator Baldwin's been in my area on several occasions, as she has yours, to talk about this issue. Congressman Kind has been working hard on this. It's nice that Congresswoman Moore is also clearly engaged in this issue. But I think on the state level, we can also do work. And so I introduced this piece of legislation a little earlier than I intended because there was a derailment just north of La Crosse in Alma, Wisconsin. So in that derailment, there were 32 cars that derailed. 20,000 gallons of denatured alcohol went into the river. This was in November of 2015. And my staff called me and the next morning and said, I think we've really got to move on this legislation. We've at least have to get the discussion started in Madison. So we introduced that legislation. I sat down with my police chief, Chief Cleveland in La Crosse, who was there to respond on the site when that train derailed. And he said, Jill, there were cars that were in the river that were upside down. There were some that were submerged, so you couldn't really see what was in the car. You couldn't see the placards. You couldn't see the numbers on the car. So they had to take a boat to get to the engine of the car where they had the manifest of what the train was carrying, because it had derailed in a part of the tracks that were kind of out in a peninsula, kind of an island that the train had gotten there through bridges. So they had to actually get in a boat to get to the engine to get the proper documentation to figure out what they were dealing with. And to me, that was, you saw these pictures, and I can't imagine being an emergency responder and not knowing what you were going into. And being a community member. Alma is like San Francisco. It's a small San Francisco. It's built on the side of the bluff there, if you've ever been through Alma. And imagine that there's, how do you exit? You know, you can go north, you can go south, that's about it. And so it was of great concern to me. So we introduced our piece of legislation and got bipartisan support. There was a lead author in the Senate, was a Republican. We got Republicans signed on, a lot because of people like CARS, who were advocating with people throughout the state about the concern of safety with rails. In my neck of the woods, we know that 3 million gallons of crude oil are transported along the Mississippi every week. 3 million gallons of crude oil every week. Now that leaves a lot of room for error. After this legislation was introduced in January, there was another derailment on the opposite side of the river between Brownsville and Reno, Minnesota. And again, questions of what was the train carrying, and we couldn't get that information. The press could not get that information. Luckily, it was the spill was vegetable oil, which still has an effect on fish and aquatic life. But when you compare it to crude oil, I'll take vegetable oil. But 15 cars ended up in the river. That was January of 2016. 850 gallons of vegetable oil. So we decided to introduce our legislation, and it has a few pieces here, again modeled after legislation that passed Minnesota, has been in effect since 2014. It included more state rail track inspectors. We know that the majority of incidents occur because of track, problems with the track. So we wanted more track inspectors in Wisconsin. It requires railroad companies to submit prevention and response plans to the state so that everybody knows what is going to happen. It provides for training for local emergency first responders along the railroad routes. And I think most of that really needs to focus on the people who are trained, the Milwaukee area, the La Crosse area, the people, the responders who have had that specialized training, because this is a very individual incident and could be massive and needs that expertise, that training that we have in those areas. We provide guidelines for coordination and response timelines in the event of a derailment. Within an hour, the rail company must have an employee there to talk with incident command about what the situation is. So people have better information and don't have to run in blindly and know what to do about evacuation. It requires the Office of the Commissioner of Railroads to submit a report to the legislature on emergency preparedness, assessment of training needs for first responders statewide, and an inventory of both public and private resources that are available in the event of a derailment or discharge. So this is important because we know that there are certain people in different parts of the state have different equipment, have expertise, and so we want a inventory of what's available in the state. And we're also looking at cross-border. For us in La Crosse, Rochester, Minnesota is actually closer than Eau Claire, and we should be able to have that a more immediate ability to work together. And that's the next bite that we take off. I think when we look at issues like this that are so huge, to me, it's in some ways similar to human trafficking, where it's a huge issue, but I think that we can take bite after bite after bite and look at what we can do now, and then we accomplish that, and then you do the next thing, and then the next thing. I understand that railroads provide an important service to us. This transportation of goods is vital to our economy. I'm not a train basher, but I think that it's important that we do this in the safest way possible and work together. And I keep calling on railroad companies to come to the table with us. And this legislation did not pass this session, so we will bring it back again. A few improvements. I think we're going to work on it a little more. Some of the feedback that we heard, we're going to take into consideration and have an even better piece of legislation next time around. And I have also asked every election year, the legislature does what's called a summer study committees. So they can be on various issues. I've been involved in SAGE funding for schools, or permanency for kids in the child welfare system under the age of 8. I know Evan was on a summer study committee with treatment courts in Wisconsin. So what we do is we look at an issue that's important to and affects people in Wisconsin. We bring Republicans, Democrats, senators, assembly reps, stakeholders, people who are providers in the community, people who are experts in this area, and we all sit down together, legislators, other citizens, and we talk about how we can make improvements in this area. So I have asked for a summer study committee on railroad issues. And the committee right now is deliberating. A lot of legislators put in ideas, and then they pick which one they're going to take. So I'm hoping that they choose to do a summer study committee on rail safety, because I think it's a very important issue for our state. And I think I'll stop there, and I'll take questions at the end. Thank you.
Thank you, Jill. Next up, we're going to hear from our 3 local community folks, and I'm very pleased we have 3 of them here. The first one is Chief Robert Ugaste, the gentleman in the snazzy outfit. He is from the city of Wauwatosa. He has 37 years of fire service experience, including 19 as the hazardous materials technician, and he has a master's degree in fire service leadership. The second speaker is Captain Russ Rivard. Raise your hand. He's a 23-year veteran with the Milwaukee Fire Department. We want to certainly hear from the fire department in Milwaukee, and has been with the department for 20 years. He's risen through the ranks and of the Milwaukee Fire Department Regional Hazardous Materials Team. And we have one of the top trained groups here in Milwaukee called Tier 1. Lastly, we have Mr. Stephen Fronk, who's in the first row, and he is the Director of Emergency Management and Homeland Security since 2009. He is the official point of contact for the Milwaukee urban area in addressing issues that might occur here in the area. So, Chief Ugaste, please come forward.
Good morning, everyone. It's nice to be here with you. Thank you for inviting me. As was told you just previously, I am the fire chief of the Wauwatosa Fire Department. Wauwatosa, in case you don't know, is a city of 47,000 that, thanks to Mayfair Mall and the Regional Medical Center, grows to a population exceeding 100,000 on weekdays. We have 100 firefighters. We work out of 3 stations. We're a career department, just like Milwaukee. We ran 7,000 calls last year. We have a lot of expertise. We train hard, and we try to be prepared for everything. You'll see on the picture here, this is our Engine 51 in front of Station 51, our headquarters. And you notice that we're very proud of the nickname for Wauwatosa, which is Tosa. And in case you don't know, if you're not from the area, we can tell whether you're from the area or not, because if you try to say Wauwatosa, we know you're not. So, are we prepared for oil train incidents? I think this picture talks a lot about that very issue. You see the freight train passing through an area that's heavily populated in Wauwatosa, known as the Village. And in retrospect, I wish I had taken another picture without the train in the way, because what you would see in the background, that building that's hiding to the left is Cafe Bavaria. To the right is Cafe Hollander, hidden behind a tree. Many nice restaurants in this little area, boutique shops, people shopping in the summer. You'll have 50 or 60 people sitting out next to Hollander under the umbrella tables. It's very quaint. You also can't see that on Saturdays, just to the right of this picture, we have the farmers market, which is very crowded, 200 to 300 people. And there's also a river that flows right underneath what you're looking at, because that's actually a bridge. And the Menominee River flows right through there. So we have life safety concerns, we have environmental concerns, we have a little bit of everything. Now, I'm going to say at this point, I want to clarify, I am not I'm not a politician, and I don't play one on TV. I was hired for my expertise, and my expertise leads me to look at situations like this, not from the standpoint of is it good or is it bad, but what is it going to reveal from the standpoint of risk, and how do we have to prepare in case something bad happens. So we leave it to the politicians to decide whether or not the rail should be there and what it should be carrying. We try to be prepared for what can happen. So back in 2013, Loch Megantic, and I always call it Loch Magnetic, so if I get it wrong, you'll know what I'm talking about, occurred. And it really caused a lot of us to wake up, because prior to that, we didn't realize how hazardous this crude oil could be. And today, we look at trains like this, and this is not unusual. This is an oil train that it's not going through Tosa, but it could be. I've seen plenty this size. They can haul up to 35 cars of crude oil. And you got to understand, crude oil comes in different types. It's not all the same. And the Bakken crude oil is not the only crude oil that has a high flash point or a low flash point that can cause problems. And it's not new to the oil industry, but it was relatively new to many of us, and even to some of us who are first responders. So this is what we see, and this is what we fear. And when most of us think about a train derailment with crude oil on board, this is what immediately flashes to mind. We expect this to happen. Now, I got to tell you, that's not necessarily the case. This is an extreme example, but it did happen. Happened on July 5th in 2013. Like I said, it's the image that comes to mind when we think of a derailment. If you've studied this, it was the result of a tragic series of decisions that led to an unstaffed train running away downhill at up to 60 miles an hour until it came to a curve in the tracks at a poor little town called Loch Magnetic. And unfortunately, when it hit that curve, all hell broke loose. And I'm told, tragically, it wasn't just the oil that caused the deaths. These train cars were hurtling through the town, crushing everything in their path. So this should not have happened, should never happen again. And I think the rail understands that, but it doesn't take away our fear, does it? The thing I want you to take away from this slide is that derailments do not always have fire. They don't always result in explosions. Milwaukee Hazmat's going to speak in a little bit, and they can speak to that even better than I. This can happen at a slower speed. It can happen where the train car is not leaking, and if the product stays in the container, it's not going to hurt you. But this did happen. It's an extreme example. So 4 facts I'd like you to consider. Fact number 1, believe it or not, railroads have always carried hazardous materials. This is nothing new. What's new is the quantity, and what's new is the product that they're carrying. Although I'll tell you, and once again, the hazmat team can talk to it better than I, but it's not the worst actor out there. It's just the one that we become aware of. And it's made people aware of the fact that these quaint trains and rails that run through our towns and next to our homes pose a danger if things aren't done safely. Like I said, a hazmat doesn't hurt you as long as it stays in the container. It's only when it gets out of the container that it can do harm. Train cars can survive a crash without leaking, and that's why one of our focuses has been give us stronger rail cars. And as a fire chief, I've got a very simple view of the world. And I try to take everything down to its simplest terms, works best for firefighters. And with hazmats and with these trains, if we can put it in a safe car that's not going to leak, the problem is solved. So, U.S. Department of Transportation took longer than they should have. Canada acted quickly after Lac Megantic, but U.S. Department of Transportation issues a final rule in 2015. And that final rule talks about the very thing we want, the better tank cars. The DOT 111 was the one they were using. It wasn't strong enough. It wasn't really designed, I'm told, for what it was being used for, but they had enough of them to haul with, so they were using them. The DOT 117 was going to be a better solution. The other thing this talked about was a new braking standard, which the railroads are resistive to, but which we think is a good idea. And it talked about new protocols for the trains to have to follow, one of which addressed speed. They had to slow down to 40 miles per hour in high-threat urban areas, such as Milwaukee, and they couldn't go faster than 50 miles per hour if they were considered one of these flammable trains throughout the rest of the state. They also came up with new testing requirements to make sure the classification of the product was being done correctly. So here's a DOT 117, and I'm not going to go into great detail. Simple firefighter terms: stronger, safer, better. We like stronger, safer. It's designed that there's steel at the end so that if it collides with another tank car, it won't rupture easily. It'll bounce. A lot of other good things that came with this. And once again, in our simple little firefighter world, DOT 117 is the solution. Until we saw Galena. And the DOT 117s didn't hold up. So very disappointing. We at the fire service are not against changing to the stronger cars. We do think it's a good thing to do, but it's not the final solution. And it's sad but true. Fact number 3, it's not your grandmother's crude oil. When I was growing up in the fire service, I got 37 years, so I can say that. When I was growing up in the fire service, when I thought of crude oil, it was thick, it was syrupy, it was very hard to light. You could hold a match to it and nothing would happen likely. You'd have to have a torch. But something changed. The Bakken crude came along, and Bakken crude to me, it's kind of like we use the generic term Coke if we want a cola. Well, Bakken crude describes a sweet, light crude that's actually not all Bakken, but it's a term that we use. And the thing with the Bakken crude oil, to our surprise, was it wasn't thick and syrupy. It was more like gasoline, and it was just as easy to ignite, or very close. Like I said, it's not new to the oil industry. They've been producing this in West Texas for some time. They knew all about it, but there weren't quantities and there weren't incidents to bring it to the public's attention. And Megantic brought it to our attention. We all hear about fracking, how they're forcing water into the subsurface and causing the oil to come up. That's what brings up the Bakken crude. And you can see the rail transportation just accelerated tremendously from just under 10,000 rail cars in 2008 to 435,000 in 2013. Like I told you earlier, each car can hold 30,000 gallons. You can have as many as 35 cars in one train or 1 million gallons. The thing I will also stress to you, though, is when there's an accident, we don't expect all 35 cars to be involved. Typically, it's a couple, three. Like Megantic, once again, extreme example, there were a lot of cars involved. Could it happen? Yes. Do we expect it to? Not typically. The other concern, though, is the federal government says because of the increase in product and the need to transport it, they're now predicting 10 derailments per year. Once again, not necessarily like Megantic, but 10 derailments nonetheless. So fact number 4, the real reason I'm here, Milwaukee County Fire Departments, and I'm going to speak, the first part of my speaking, my presentation is going to be with my hat on as a fire chief. And then I'm going to switch hats, but we're still the fire chief here. The Milwaukee County Fire Departments have done some really good things, and I'm very proud of our association for the way we've tried to move forward in this area. Once we became aware of the concern, we started looking at what do we need to do to protect our citizens and be prepared in case there's an incident. One of the things that we needed was more foam. We all carry foam, but there wasn't enough for a big incident. Not even Milwaukee had enough for a big incident. Now, fortunately, we have Mitchell Airfield nearby, and they have a lot of foam for, hope it never happens, but for a plane crash. But even they didn't have the right type. We needed alcohol resistant. So thanks to Milwaukee County Emergency Management, we partnered with them. We partner with a lot of people. That's how we get things done. That's why we're here this morning. Thank you. We partnered with them and were able to get funding from Wisconsin Emergency Management for, initially it was going to be 600 gallons of foam, and they upped it to 1,500 gallons, which Mitchell Airfield is storing for us, and they will bring to the scene if we need it. The other thing we did is we took it upon ourselves to meet with the railroads. And we invited Union Pacific and Canadian Pacific, and Canadian Pacific, by the way, is the one that runs through Tosa. And Union Pacific does too. They don't haul crude oil anymore, so Canadian Pacific is our focus. We met with them and talked to them and said, what do you think we need to be prepared here? Here's what we think we need, and how can we partner? How can you help us? And to their credit, and I'll be honest, initially my experience with the railroads, it was very hard to get information. But this was a couple years into it, and they were starting to learn that they needed to work with the communities, and they were very good at working with us. They talked to us about the resources that they would bring to bear. They talked to us about providing training at no cost for our people, and they talked about resources. One of those resources being a specialized foam fire trailer that they brought in from Chicago. They had 7 of them in Chicago. They said, we don't need 7 there. We'll bring one up to Milwaukee. Milwaukee Hazmat has that now, and they will bring it to the scene if we have a derailment. The other thing you have to realize is our personnel are trained in dealing with hazardous materials. Now, there's something unique about a train derailment, and it's hazmat. So there's even more training that we're starting to send people to in Pueblo, Colorado. And Tosa Fire is sending 3 this year. I think many other fire departments are doing the same. It's free, and it brings our training to another level. The other thing that I'll tell you that you should be very reassured by is we have a strong mutual aid system, and not just Milwaukee County, but in the state of Wisconsin. We're part of MABUS with the fire department, mutual aid box alarm system. And MABUS not only covers much of the state of Wisconsin, it covers all of Illinois, goes into Missouri, Iowa, and Indiana. I could literally request resources from that far away if we needed them. So even though we have a lot of resources locally and we work closely with Milwaukee Fire with their 800 plus people, we've got our 100 plus at Wauwatosa, West Allis, North Shore the same. We all partner together. We all help each other. None of us are big enough to stand alone, and we know that. The other thing I'll point out to you is that we are very fortunate to have the Milwaukee Fire Department hazmat team. Because even though each of the fire departments have people trained in hazardous materials, and even though some of them are sending people to Pueblo for the extra training, it's unique to have a group of people, a group of firefighters who can almost focus entirely on hazardous materials. It's going to raise their expertise, and it does with Milwaukee. We're always reassured as a fire department to know that they're nearby. And the nice thing is they would give us their resource even despite this, but they're also a state asset, which means they're required to respond if they're requested regionally. The last thing, Milwaukee County Emergency Management's working to develop a county guidance document for rail incidents. So there's a lot of things happening behind the scenes. We're not waiting for something to happen. We're trying to get ahead of the curve. Something I didn't note on here that I should have, I'm one of the directors. We have a group called the Tosa Area Preparedness Partners. It's not just Wauwatosa, it's a region. It's a public-private partnership that meets on a quarterly basis. And its members include corporate leaders, business continuity people, security, heads of security for corporate offices, and the public sector. And one of the most recent conversations we had was on train derailments. And we had representatives there from, once again, Union Pacific and Canadian Pacific, and the Milwaukee Hazmat team, and it's just a great vehicle to let people know what's going on. The communities are also working to prepare. This is a picture from just last week at West Allis. The West Allis Fire Department and City of West Allis hosted a tabletop training where representatives from the trains came in. They had the DNR represented, they had Milwaukee Hazmat, their neighboring fire departments, the police department, Mayor Devine was there, and some of the electeds, and they talked through what would happen if there was a derailment with a spill. So once again, this is important. We're going to do this in Tosa in the fall. I think the city of Milwaukee is headed in this direction. We're all trying to prepare. And it's really critical to get your electeds involved because you don't want them to walk in not knowing what's going on and try to take over. Now I need to change hats. I'm not just the fire chief of Tosa, I'm also the vice president of the state fire chiefs. And what that does is it gives me a little bit different perspective because as the chief of Tosa, I'm focused on my city and our neighbors and what I can do to keep us safe, but my voice is not as loud as when I'm part of a statewide association. And when we speak with one voice, we have a lot of authority and we have a lot of people listening. Doesn't mean we can force something, but it means we can get the word out when there's a concern. The Wisconsin State Fire Chiefs naturally were monitoring the situation with the crude oil and the trains. And we had a lot of our members calling and saying, what can you tell us about this? What's going on? I was personally in touch with the international fire chiefs to see what their position was and what they were doing, the Great Lakes fire chiefs. And eventually we came to the conclusion we needed to create a position paper to let people know what the fire chiefs thought about this issue. Now, one of the things that constantly seems to come up when you deal with this issue is the railroad says, you know what, it's really not our fault. We've got third-party shippers that are responsible for the product. We can't control what they do. And the third-party shippers say, well, it's a railway. And at the end of the day, we all got to work together. And we got to prioritize the safety of our people and of the environment so that we don't have bad things happen, not only in this area, but across the United States. So what is our position? We had 6 recommendations. The first one is reduce the hazard. Something that I didn't realize is that it's possible to stabilize the product before it's shipped. And if you do that, then it's not going to matter as much how strong the container is, because if you have an incident, it's not going to result in the cataclysmic results we saw in Lac Megantic. Second one is improve the container. Now, we were disappointed to see what happened in Galena. I'll be honest with you, my heart dropped. I thought, really? But it's a step in the right direction, and we don't want them to stop moving in that direction. We think they should go ahead with the move to get things into DOT 117s, but they should fund research and development to find stronger solutions, to find better solutions. We're America. We can come up with better solutions to try and control this situation, and we want them to continue to pursue this. Maintain the infrastructure. I don't want to see that rusty bridge anymore on TV. And to be honest with you, I don't know whether it's strong enough or not, but it bothers everyone when they won't be transparent. And so what we're requesting that they do, we want the Federal Railroad Administration to increase inspections along oil train routes. We want them to provide recommendations to improve safety of infrastructure. And we request that every bridge or trestle that experiences crude oil or ethanol traffic be inspected and certified biannually with documentation provided to local officials. This one is near and dear to my heart. It makes me nuts. Why is it okay that if something is too dangerous to go more than 40 miles per hour through Milwaukee, it can speed up to 50 miles per hour through the rest of the state? The lives outside of Milwaukee are worth just as much as the lives in Milwaukee. We would like to see the trains all slow down to 40 miles per hour. Now, I'm talking flammable liquid trains, but I don't see how that makes sense. Increase the safety. Protocols should be required that will prevent trains like what happened at Lac Megantic from moving unintentionally. So it just can't happen, never can happen again. And there are technologies available, such as hot box and hot wheel detection systems, that will actually monitor the rail car and report remotely to the rail company if there's a problem happening, so they can stop the train before it gets bad. And we'd like to see them invest in this. We also support the enhanced braking systems. And then lastly, cooperation. The railroads are doing a better job, but they've got to embrace the need to work with the communities their tracks pass through. It's going to require transparency and a willingness to provide timely answers to questions. And we strongly encourage the railroads to continue to provide the training and even to increase it so the first responders have a better idea of how to safely deal with incidents when they happen. In closing, we appreciate the railroad's efforts. We're not going to discount them, but we're not satisfied, and they shouldn't be either. We've got to continually strive to develop and maintain strong working relationships, because that's how we're going to stay safe and keep our people safe. If you'd like a copy of this, it's available on the Fire Chief's website, www.wsfca.com. And that's my presentation. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. This thing's going to drive me crazy. Normally I talk like this, okay? And I don't think I need this, but I know they're videotaping it, so I'll suck it up and I'll try to be a little quiet. This is driving me crazy. So thank you for the opportunity of being here. My name is Russell Rivard. I'm a captain with the Milwaukee Fire Department, and I'm the director of our regional hazmat team. So let me try to explain that just a little bit. I work for the fire department. I'm the captain of Engine 25, but besides that, our roles include a regional hazmat team. So not only do we take care of all the hazardous materials for the city of Milwaukee, but we cover the county of Milwaukee and the 4 counties surrounding Milwaukee. Besides that, we are a Tier 1 team, and all that means is if it gets really big, we cover basically the whole east side of the state, from the Illinois border to Lake Superior, from the Wisconsin River over, okay? It has to be something pretty spectacular. What am I doing wrong? There, that's great. Better? Is that all right? All right, so it has to be something very spectacular for us to get pulled out of the 5-county region, but that's what we do. Now, the chief it was great following him because I had no idea what he was going to talk about, and he talked about everything I was going to say, so it's cool. This is going to be very short for me. What I really liked is when he started off and he said he is not a politician. In my eyes, he is way more of a politician than I am. Okay, so let's get that straight right now. When you saw the pictures of the people working by the derailments, that's me, all right? So it was really cool following him up, okay? This picture right here, we've talked about it all morning, Lac Magnetique up in Quebec. If you look at my background a little bit, it's going to talk that it's in there. It says that I'm a master instructor with the International Association of Firefighters. There's 80 of us in the United States and Canada that go around and train other fire departments on hazardous materials. The reason why I'm bringing that up is 2 of our members are from Quebec that actually were at that incident. So it's good for me because I not only read about it, I asked questions of the responders that were there. And I think it's good to know a little bit about the background. The chief, he really talked about it. This wasn't really a mechanical issue. It was an issue that was human error. The train was parked outside the city, and it was on a grade. And what happened is it was unmanned, it came unparked, it was unmanned and rolled into the city. By the time it got to the city, it was going 60 miles an hour, and that's way too fast. There was no one in control of the train, a runaway train. It hit a corner, and it derailed. When it derailed, the cars, picture this as a train car. The sheer weight of the car keeps it on its wheels. The wheels are called trucks. There's 2 pins that sit on each side, and it's designed that way. It's designed where if it derails, we want this to tumble, not stop abruptly and not take everything with it. We want it to, so the picture that you see, it's designed to do what it's supposed to do. It's supposed to tumble and go. Well, the sheer speed from the tanks that derailed that day, it was more mechanical damage that caused the deaths than the toxicity of the chemical itself. In fact, from my colleagues that were there, the fire didn't actually start until 2 hours after the derailment. Okay, they still had issues with the crude out there. I just want you to know really what happened, and I just thought I'd share that. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about preparedness, I'm going to talk about prevention, and I'm going to talk about response. Okay, the preparedness. This is where the chief stole my thunder, but that's okay. We do a lot of hands-on training. My day consists of training all day. In fact, immediately from here, I'm heading over to Wauwatosa, and I'm training with a couple of their units there. So this is what we do. We constantly prepare for anything that we might see in come up on our radar. Just recently, we've done a lot of hands-on training with Canadian Pacific and Union Pacific. I'll show you, that's a picture of the trailer that the chief was talking about that CP gave us to use in case we have a derailment. And I'm on a first-name basis with their emergency coordinators from Canadian Pacific and Union Pacific. They take it very serious. I know there was some issues about not getting the information. We don't have that issue. There's not a train car that's out on the rail right now where I can't make one phone call and know exactly what's in it, just in the position that we have. So maybe the press doesn't get to know right away what's inside of it. That doesn't fall on the fire department. I have immediate access to all of that. So we've trained a lot with the railroads themselves. There is quite a few classes. The chief talked about it. There's a couple in Pueblo. You go to the National Transportation Safety. They run it. It's a railroad school, and they make you a trained car specialist. I can say I'm a proud member of that group. I am a trained car specialist, along with 80% of the 75 members that are on our regional team. So we take rail pretty serious, and I like to say that we're very prepared for a train issue. We do monthly training besides our daily training that we do specifically for hazardous materials. We don't just study crude, but we study all hazards, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later. We do things like we look at not only property conservation and saving people, but impacts of the environment. And we're prepared for that. Okay, this foam trailer, like I said, it was donated by Canadian Pacific. It's housed at one of our firehouses in the city. We have access for it anytime we need it, along with that 1,500 gallons of additional foam that they provided that's stored at the airport. Cross training. We're, like I said, right after this, I'm going to take off this nice fancy shirt and get a little dirty with the Wauwatosa Fire Department. We cross train a lot. And just for your information, it hasn't always been that way. We were always considered the state of Milwaukee, and we didn't really play well with our suburban counterparts. And there's been a change of leadership, and with that change of leadership, we start to play nice with our neighbors, and we play a lot with them, so that's a good thing. And then the public awareness, and that's where the preparedness is coming from. 10 years ago, they would have never had someone in my position come in here to talk to the League of Women Voters, okay? And we're just getting better at that, and thanks for the invite, and it's a pleasure to be here. Prevention. From my perspective as a regional hazmat person, I'm not in the prevention role. They call me when things go wrong, okay? Prevention, that's your job and your job. Legislatures, action groups like yours, we can make recommendations. We're happy to make recommendations, but really that's up to you. The prevention thing, we don't really take care of it that much. All right, so response. Let me tell you a little bit about the Tier 1 response, what that means. The state of Wisconsin has 8 regional hazmat teams that comprise it. Up until 2 years ago, we were all on the same level. But with funding and the lack of the funding, they said, you know what? We probably don't need all 8 teams in the state to be at the same level. So I'm not saying that Milwaukee is a better regional team than any other one in the state. It's just we probably get more responses. Okay, it just makes sense. We're a very big industrial city, and we have a lot of accidents that happen here. So Milwaukee was picked as one of the Tier 1 teams. All that means is we cover a bigger part of the state, okay? We still provide that blanket of protection that you sleep under every night, and we're right here in your backyard, which is a great plus for you. And for us to respond to the city of Wauwatosa, I think we can beat one of their engine companies that are there because our house is closer to the train tracks than his farthest house is. So you don't have to worry about a delay. We'll probably be there right away. Okay, so that Tier 1 team, just a little heads up about that. We are designed to take care of not only toxic industrial chemicals like crude oil and anhydrous ammonia, but we are trained to take care of weapons of mass destruction and radiological incidents that might happen, and anything that is done with intent to hurt people. So if they use any kind of chemical, someone uses any kind of chemical with the intent to hurt someone, that's where the Tier 1 team comes in, and we're going to come help out. We have different levels of response on our hazmat team. It can be as simple as a pre-planning. The chief showed you that picture of the West Allis Tabletop. That happened just last week. We had 3 of our members there, and we sent our full on-duty company over there to represent the regional hazmat team. We do that kind of training way more than I can possibly tell you. And then it's phone consultations. My phone rings off the hook at the firehouse I'm at for our regional response. We take care of those 5 counties. They have a standing policy that they can call us 24/7, and we do a lot of consultations over the phone. Then that leads to a CAT response. We just had one of those 2 days ago. Aldrich Chemical has a facility right over on Ember Lane, right downtown here. And at 7 o'clock at night, they started off-gassing a little methyl mercaptan. And if you don't know what methyl mercaptan is, it's the stuff they put in the natural gas to give it that smell. So they didn't really notify anyone. So all of a sudden, every engine company in the valley over here is chasing natural gas leaks until one of us said, hey, I wonder if Aldrich is off-gassing methyl mercaptan. Well, we sent a 2-person CAT team right down there with some meters where we can get them right into place right away, and we found out that's what it was, and just to give you an example of that. Now, a full hazmat response for us is we have a 53-foot tractor trailer that's equipped with roughly $1.5 million of equipment. Along with that 53-foot tractor trailer, we dispatch a Ford F-150 that pulls a trailer, and we will come with 18 hazmat technicians to wherever's needed. And that will provide us what we need to not only get on the scene and take a look at some incidents like that, but be able to suit up our members and get in and mitigate what we need to fix to make the scene safe again. Our big job when we respond is to stop the emergency. That's our job. We get in there and we try to make it safe. The blast zone that was shown in the beginning, our firehouse is in that blast zone. So we take this to heart a little bit, okay? We focus on this. But that's what our job is when we show up, we're going to come in, we're going to mitigate what we can. I like to refer to it as putting a Band-Aid on it. We can stop the bleeding a little bit and make it safe for the railroad to come in with their heavy equipment. That's what we do. And on the bottom, like I said, best of all, we're right in your backyard, and the chief knows it, that our firehouse is so close. In fact, we've been responding in and out of the city for a long time. So I'm going to just wrap this up a little bit, and what I want to tell you from a personal standpoint is don't lose any sleep over this Bakken crude stuff, because knowing what I know about the train industry, Bakken crude doesn't scare me. It looks phenomenal when it blows up. It really does. But we've had just as much methanol in the state of Wisconsin that's been going on the tracks forever, and no one ever says anything about methanol. All right? And I'm not here to pick a side. That's not my job. My job is to respond and make it safe. But I have to tell you, on a scale of 1 to 10, when I look at crude oil, I'm putting it at about a number 4, because there's a heck of a lot of other chemicals that go over the rail that are really bad. Crude oil isn't toxic. I like to say it goes KFB. And KFB, that's a very technical fire term. That means kerfrickin' boom. Okay, that's what it does. That's the only part that scares me about the crude oil, is that it goes KFB. And we have detectors that look for that. There's other chemicals out there where if you breathe a little bit of it, it kills you right now. And those are the things that really scare me. And I'm not trying to tell you that the rail company is very good at what they do. They're very good. When you see derailments and they bring the numbers, you have to remember that the train company considers a derailment a train that comes off its trucks. The wheels come off the rail. That happens in the yard all the time, and it counts as a derailment. Okay, so the numbers, they're very safe. It's not as safe as a pipeline. I'll be honest with you, a pipeline would be better, but until they build a pipeline, train transportation is probably the safest out there. Okay, so just to leave you with a couple things. Realistically, I would be more worried about getting in a car accident today on the way home, because statistics are going to say that will kill you way more than a train derailment will. If the train derailment happens, we're trained for it. That's what we do. That's my job. I promise we will take care of it. We will make it safe, and we'll take care of it. It doesn't happen. All 35 cars don't all blow up at one time. And if one leaks, we'll get the leak stopped, and we'll get it stopped quickly. Statistically, you're more likely to get hit by lightning than have a train derailment. Okay? If you were to ask me on a professional level what hazardous material scares me the most, it wouldn't be a train, it wouldn't be a rail car, it's this guy. And that might be kind of funny, but our society in the United States, we're dealing with that one person who does the craziness. And he's the one who scares me, because we can't put him in a container. We can't tell him to slow down. He doesn't wear a placard that says it's crude oil. He's the one that scares me. But most of all, for the League of Women Voters, you know what? If I was you, what would scare me the most? is this guy. Do you know who this guy is? This is your 35-year-old son who decides to come live in your basement and move back home. He would scare me the most. Ladies and gentlemen, it's been a pleasure to talk to you today. If you have any questions, please ask me at the end.
I thought this was going to be easy, but all the good jokes are already gone. I saw Chief Ugaste's presentation. He gave me a copy of it last week. We were all at the exercise in West Allis, and I said, okay, he's covering that, he's covering that, he's covering that. Okay, yeah, he's got that, he's got that, he's got that. And then I see Captain Rivard's presentation, and I go, yeah, me too, right? And to be honest with you, I've seen the CARS presentation. I thought, okay, they're going to cover that. And then I see representatives in Billingsley, is that Billings? Yeah, Billings. And I go, well, it's covered. I don't have that much I want to do. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about how we got where we are in terms of preparedness and where we'd like to go. I'm in a position, as it says, I'm the Director of Emergency Management Homeland Security for the City of Milwaukee, but I'm also the point of contact for the Urban Area Security Initiative. It's something that was created after 9/11. To be honest with you, my position didn't exist in the City of Milwaukee, either as Emergency Management Director or as point of contact for Ugaste 15 years ago. After 9/11, they created this. This position was created utilizing funds from the Department of Homeland Security. There are 64 of me in the country. Every major city with a large enough metropolitan statistical area has somebody who does what I do. They have one in New York City, they have one in Los Angeles, Chicago, St. Louis, Orlando, Honolulu, Minneapolis, Cincinnati, places like that. And as a result of that position being created, I was in at the beginning, and it says I've held this position since 2009, and that's true. Prior to the position being specifically created by this urban area working group, which is comprised of 5 counties, representatives from 5 counties in the Milwaukee area. In fact, it's Milwaukee, Ozaukee, Washington, Racine, Wauwatosa, and then we extend our reach into Kenosha and Jefferson because of the freeways and things of that nature. But prior to that, if I had called someone, if someone in Milwaukee had called someone in Waukesha, or vice versa at 2 o'clock in the morning, the response would have been, who are you and why the hell are you calling me? That was short-sighted, but that's the way it was 15 or 20 years ago. In order to encourage people to cross jurisdictional lines and cross disciplinary lines in terms of police, fire, and things like that, the feds, with funding back in 2004, threw money on the table. And to be honest with you, that's exactly what they did. They just threw money on the table and said, figure it out. But they said, you have to reach consensus. That brought the chief from Milwaukee Police Department in contact with the chief from Milwaukee Fire Department, in contact with the chief from Waukesha Fire Department, mayors, county executives in areas, people who did not normally work together or speak to each other. And at that point, there was $10 million on the table. This was in the first year, with no rules. Well, that didn't work very well in terms of, because the big dogs wanted it all. Every big dog wanted it all, whether, and they were growling at everybody else. And that's actually when I was brought in. Prior to doing this, I'm an attorney, and please don't hold that against me, but as a result, I'm able to see both sides of most positions. I'm able to, in fact, some people might say I'm able to speak out of both sides of my mouth. So I could go out to Waukesha County and talk to them, and at the same time I could talk to Tom Barrett, and I could talk to the chief here and the chief there. And my job was to bring them together and reach consensus. I was able to do that, and it wasn't a pleasant experience. In fact, when I was first offered this job, shortly after the first 2 rounds of money, I turned it down because I was tired of the bickering and the me-first attitudes that were being expressed by everyone, because everyone wanted the resources. These dollars were earmarked for many of the things that you saw on the screens, the trucks, the hazmat team training, the bomb squad training. All of those things flowed through this pool of money. It didn't cover all of it, but if you think of $10 million being spent in a 4-county area in that first 2-year period, that's a lot of money. That's a lot of training for the fire departments. That's a lot of bomb robots. That's when we talk about the foam trailers, things like that. Those have all been paid for through the Urban Area Security Initiative up until the last round of funding in 2010, at which point, because of cutbacks in funding, and I believe Captain Rivard referred to them, because of cutbacks in funding, the Milwaukee area, urban area, was removed from that list. They reduced the funding from 64 down to 25 urban areas. And we were told, instead of getting $4 million, which is what we received in 2010, you get 0. Now, I could understand, and I spoke with both of our state senators, our U.S. senators at the time, saying, look, I can understand cutbacks, I can understand the need to reprioritize, and I can work with just about any number you come up with other than 0. I had a tough time budgeting 0, and I still do, but luckily, as a result of this, and after I took over back in 2009, just before the floods that we had here, which kind of threw us in a different area, luckily the state had decided, along with the city of Milwaukee, that the position, and it's sort of a liaison position, an administrative position, I do not participate in direct response. That's Captain Rivard's job. I don't participate. I'm normally not at the scene until the fire's out, because after they turn off the lights and the sirens and they go home, it's still my job to clean up the mess. My job is sort of the aftermath. Well, it's twofold. One, to make sure that the resources are available for the people who really do the job, whether it's the Milwaukee Fire Department or the Wauwatosa Fire Department or the police departments or the sheriff's departments or things of that nature. Being this overall, I take a 30,000-foot view. I look at it from a regional perspective. That's because about half of my salary still comes from a pool of money that goes to the state of Wisconsin that's called the Homeland Security Grant Program. And the rest of it comes from the city of Milwaukee. So I have to split my time between sort of regional activities and activities that take place within the city of Milwaukee. We do that by training, by exercising. We administer programs. We make sure that people have their certifications. We meet with all of the people that Chief Ugaste mentioned and all of the people that Captain Rivard mentioned. As I said, I have the occasion to speak to people in Washington, D.C., as well as the state of Wisconsin, and I sit on the Homeland Security Funding Advisory Board, because the state is given a pool of money to divide up between 72 counties. And basically, we have representation, luckily, on that advisory board, and we're going to meet in April. That's where the funding for the foam came from that ended up. We started out with, was it 600 gallons or 600 gallons was what we started out, we ended up with 1,500. And that actually happened the day of, and that's my job too. As a lawyer, I've had the opportunity to learn a bit about bargaining and trading and things like that. So basically, we cut some deals. We eliminated some things that weren't quite as important. I try not to buy things with wheels on them anymore. We don't need any more fancy command posts. We've got enough of that. We need people who are well-trained. We need people who are well-equipped so that they can do the job that really needs to be done. I support much of what CARS has said along the way. I support much of what your bill proposes be done. I worked with Senator Baldwin prior to her introducing some of the legislation, and in fact, that was I was in one of those pictures. I'm going, that's actually one of the better pictures that you see of me. Usually, I've got one of those, but basically, so I was very happy to see the people represented here today. But what we have is that the solutions here, we've done everything we can, I think, at this level in terms of preparing our personnel respond to and attempt to recover from. Is it because I'm holding this? No, I think we might be running out of time. Well, then I'm going to stop talking very soon. But no, we've done everything we can, I think, at this point, to respond to and recover from these type of incidents. The problem is that they still can happen. And as Chief Rivard indicated, and I believe Chief Ugaste indicated, these are not the only nasty things that could happen to you out there. Risk is out there. Car accidents are out there. Bad guys are out there. And I have to address all those, this is just one of the issues that I had to worry 2 years ago in February when the meteor went over the city in the Soviet Republic and landed in the lake. It didn't kill anybody, but it blew out the windows in 13,000 buildings, and it was February. And I'm sitting there saying, okay, we've got a lake, and there's still meteors up there, and 13,000 buildings in Milwaukee without windows, and it's February, and I'm going, oh, shit. There isn't enough plywood to board up all those windows to keep those pipes from freezing so that people can live in their homes. I'm going to have to figure out where all these people are going to live. And, well, the first thing I did was made contact with some of the big box stores like Walmart and Home Depot and say, how quickly can we get trucks if we ever needed them on the road? I didn't even ask the powers that be how we were going to pay for them. I just said, we're going to need semis of materials and the ability to respond to it. That's what I do. I'll be in the Emergency Operations Center. They'll be where it's hot and nasty. I'll be in an air-conditioned building, and hopefully there will be communication going back and forth via radio and telephone and things of that nature, and they're going to say, we need dump trucks. I got dump trucks. We need cherry pickers. I got cherry pickers. We need more firefighters. I can get more firefighters. All of those things, we want to make sure that the incident commanders at the scene have the training that they need and the materials that they need to respond to anything that happens. I'm not here to say we're going to prevent the things that happen. I think the legislative process is more appropriate for doing that. We can ask people to be safe. We've moved forward a bit in terms of having the ability to request these reports. I haven't seen any of these reports yet about the condition of the bridges and things like that, but I just did receive something from Senator Baldwin regarding the process, and I'm not quite sure who's going to exercise that process or how quickly the response is going to be. But we've also received a lot of collaboration and cooperation from the railroads themselves. It's amazing when you put people in a room. We had people in the room in West Allis from the DNR, from the railroads, from the city of Milwaukee, from Wauwatosa, and we go all over. We're doing what we can, and I'm trying to make sure that they have the resources that they need to do what they're going to need to do. But I think that groups like this, whether it's CARS or whether it's some other form of public representation, is actually the answer that we're going to have to pursue. And we'll work with what you've got. Again, we have very limited resources. We still go to the Funding Advisory Board. Again, that'll be in April, and we are requesting items through the Urban Area Working Group. We have a priority system that we meet with representatives from all of these counties and these departments, and we make decisions as to what our priorities are and at what level we'll request funding, and then we see what we get. One of the things that we received last year was the foam, and we're very happy to have that. But that being said, I think that everything that I could have said, everything that I was going to see was covered. As I said, I received this a week ago from Chief Ugaste. That's his fire truck. Oh, and last thing is, and this, he's heard this before, I live just on the edge of what you would call the danger zone. I live in the city of Milwaukee. However, some of my most cherished possessions, things I most cherish in the world, live about 100 yards from this. They live that picture of the village of Wauwatosa. My son lives about 100 yards over there on Church Street, which is 1 block out of the village, along with my granddaughter and his wife, who's going to have another grandchild in about 6 weeks. This is about 100 yards from the tracks, right, Chief? Wouldn't you say? So basically, I've assured Chief Ugaste he's got everything he needs. He's first. So it's all going to Wauwatosa as quickly as I can. I'm sorry. You live downtown. Hopefully there's only one derailment and then you can be first. Okay. But basically we'll take care of whatever we can. So thank you, and I appreciate your time.
Thank you. Oh, that's yours. Okay. Very good. Thank you very much. We will now move to questions. Yes, is there a question in the back?
People need to know what the risk is, what to do in an emergency. There needs to be public knowledge of the risk of these trains.
I certainly appreciate your concerns. The problem that we face, though, as an emergency service is what we're going to ask the public to do is dependent on the incident itself. And unfortunately, it's different every time. And like Lock Megantic, there was nothing they could have done. It was over before they knew what happened. And that's sad. And I hope that never happens around here. But it's going to depend on the prevailing wind. It's going to depend on what's leaking. It's going to depend on whether we think there's time to get you out, or it's better to just shut your windows and lock the doors and put blankets against the bottom of the door to keep things out. It's all across the board. I wish it were easy enough to where we could choreograph it, but it's just not possible. Do you gentlemen have anything to add to that?
I think Chief Ugaste hit it on the head. There's no specific plan. We have general evacuation plans for moving parts of the city to other parts of the city, but depending on what happens and where it happens and what the population is and things of that nature, we can't sit there and say, oh, like, you live in that building, well, you should go that way if something happens. We have a system, a notification system in place that we can basically push messages, whether it's through direct contact with crawls along the bottom of your television, like Amber Alerts. We can notify people within a specific geographic area that we can define by computer program, and all the cell phones in that area ring with a similar message, either text or voice, so that people will be told, this has happened, do this. But basically, other than that, that's going to have to be an on-the-fly, depending on what happens, as it happens.
Yeah, just one more thing that occurred to me as Steve was speaking. He's right about the fact that we have the ability to reach out to the community and let them know what to do if they have a hardline phone. We've got the Code Red's notification system in Wauwatosa. Most communities have a similar reverse 911 system so they can reach out. The thing that people need to realize with that, though, is a lot of people today have cell phones. They don't have hardline phones. And if you don't let us know what that number is, we don't know you're in the TOSA. So that's, it's really critical. And in the Wauwatosa website, we ask people to contact us and sign up for the Code Red system. But if you're one of the people that's decided you don't want to pay for a hardline phone anymore and you want to just use a cell phone, which I don't see a problem with, if you don't let us know that, we don't know your number. So, and the other thing, Captain Rivard was whispering in my ear, and he should be the one up here talking, but since he gave it to me. When we pull up on an incident, we have something called the Emergency Response Guide. It's a federal publication that we basically look up what the chemical is, and it's based on generic properties of chemicals, so some of them are grouped together. It's not specific to every chemical, but that alone tells us small spill, large spill, which way the wind's blowing, how far away we need to get people, and once again, that alters what we're going to do. One might say 100 yards away. Another might say a mile away. So it's very hard to predict what we're going to have to do when the situation occurs.
Thanks for your question. When I was on the county board for 8 years before I became a legislator, we looked at emergency preparedness, and they showed what would happen if we had a scenario where a cement truck drove off an overpass and fell on the train tracks. What would have happened if a train would have been going down with it? And they showed the plume, and I realized I had no part in that because my house was close enough I would be gone. So I would have no decisions to make. They just have to figure it out without me. But part of this legislation asked for the Office of the Commissioner of Railroads to do an inventory of our preparedness. And I think that would include things like that. In my city of La Crosse, we are working on a plan regarding specifically rail because of our CARS group. So our CARS group talked to the head, our emergency, Keith Butler, who's this incredible person who lives emergency preparedness. And so we've had community meetings where the public comes, and with our narrow, again, Bluff River, narrow north-south corridor for evacuation, it's difficult. And like you were talking about, facilities of vulnerable populations that are along the railroad tracks, we're tracking that. We're tracking schools that are along the railroad tracks. Part of our problem was UWL would be a great place to evacuate to, but it's too close. And in case of an emergency, all those parents are going to come to the schools. Where would I go as a mom? I'm heading to my elementary school to get my kids. So there's a lot of work to be done on that, and part of that's education of the public. And so I think the public plays a part where they can ask for those plans, check on those plans, and take part and know what's going on. We had a cafeteria full of people and so really the public plays a part in this, I think.
Thanks for the question. I think that's something I usually think about every time a train passes through. And my plan, I'm from California, so we had earthquake drills all the time. So we know exactly what to do when something hits. But then, if an oil train were to derail right next to where I live, I think I'll just be thankful that I had a pretty full life and and then run for the Milwaukee River. But I think in the case of the Watertown derailment, the first on the scene were actually some of the activists from the Watertown cars. And then a lot of people are walking toward the train cars that are already leaking. And then they were curious, walking toward the trains. What do you do in this situation? And then the cars folks were trying to get people to evacuate the area to get away from the train. So I think that I think educating the public it is part of what we do. But I think it's also really important for people to know that some basics, like the oil train were derailed, don't run, don't walk toward it. Run in the opposite direction. I think that's probably the most optimal.
Yeah, I just wanted to add a couple of comments just in our role in scanning other states and what's going on, listening and reading. I'm aware that in Minnesota, the civic conversation seems to be much further along than it is here, and that could have to do with some of the current dynamics of state government here in the state of Wisconsin, let me put it that way. But for example, the Minnesota State Director of Homeland Security pretty much has instructed their citizens to prepare to evacuate, telling people that are in the blast zone that they need to think about where grandma is, they need to think where the kindergarten is, they need to realize that there are not enough first responders, firemen, policemen, et cetera, to come knocking on every door once one of these incidents starts. And then therefore starting that public discussion of awareness. The other thing is that they issued a census. They know how many of their citizens they've got in the blast zone. I asked Forest Ethics, which is an organization, we work for those figures for here, and we received them last week. But I think this thing of starting the public discussion, the phone call may or may not work. I think if you don't preload that phone call with a conversation with the public, if the phone rings in the middle of the night, I'm not sure it's going to be an effective way to communicate with people. People could think it's a crank call. So observing what's going on in Minnesota, I think it would just help if there was much more of a public discussion of the hazard.
Okay, thank you. Ruth? The question has to do with whether or not the office that Mr. Fronk is associated with does communicate with public health officers in the communities in the county to address the issue.
In addition to some of the other hats that I wear, I'm also on what was called WEP, now it's HERC, the Health Emergency Response Coalition. Basically, it's comprised of health officers from 7 counties, I believe, southeastern Wisconsin, as well as the hospitals and Paul Biedritsky, who you see on television on occasion. He usually attends. Jose Rodriguez attends. And these are the kinds of things. We have a network. We also have slots for these people in our emergency operations center so that if there's a health issue, they're aware of what's going on out there, and they'll be there to help us formulate the proper dissemination of information. As to what's being done in terms of informing the public of the health risk beforehand, I mean, again, it depends on what the event is. As I believe was indicated by one of the experts here, that this crude oil is not near as toxic as some of the things that go by on the rail, and nor is it near as toxic as that semi that's next to you on the freeway or that drives down Capitol Drive. There are hazardous materials that will kill you if they leak, that you come within the danger zone on a regular basis. But as long as they stay in that container, they're safe. You're safe. You're safe 40 feet away, you're safe 4 feet away, as long as they stay inside of that container. Now, we can't possibly inform the public as to what would be the appropriate thing to do in every exposure to every hazardous chemicals, because some of them are heavy, some of them are light, some of them you basically turn off the air conditioning unit, close your doors and your windows, and you're fine. Other ones, as was indicated here, I think it's basically go away, go far away as fast as you can. People should consider that. I think that what was brought up here about people in Minnesota being made more aware of the fact that you should prepare. You should think about these things. You should have a go kit. You should know where you're going to go. Your family should know where we all go to Aunt Susie's because she lives in Oconomowoc and she's got a big house, and we all know that. You know, that's the kind of decision making that people have to make. And I know that everybody doesn't have an Aunt Susie with a big house 40 miles away, but we all should figure out, how am I going to handle this if I have to leave right now? Was it pills, purses, pets? That's yeah. Grab your pills, grab your purses, grab your pets, and the last one is, I've told my wife, make sure you grab the dog. Because otherwise, I'm going to have to go. I will go back, even if it's not good. But those are the kind of things that people should be prepared to do. They have to be prepared to take care of themselves. I cannot take care of 600,000 people in the city and 1.7 people in the metropolitan statistical area. People have to make some of those decisions themselves. Unfortunately, some people are more, most of the people in this room, I think, I would be disappointed if all of you didn't say, well, I can handle that. There are people, however, in our community that can't because of physical disabilities, because of other disabilities, because of the fact that they're too busy thinking about where they're going to get the money to buy groceries today or something like that. There are people who probably need better educational systems, and those are the people that worry me the most. One of the things that I heard along the way in the last several years was the fact that all of us who have the ability to take care of ourselves have the responsibility to take care of ourselves, because there are people who don't have that ability. There will always be the poor, and there will be the disabled, or whatever functional needs, whatever description you want. Everybody in this room I would like to be able to say, I'm not going to take responsibility. I'm sorry, but you've got to figure that out for yourself. Good, you've got it taken care of. And I appreciate that. And that's not that I don't care about you. But I'm saying there are people who don't think about it, who haven't thought about it, who could be affected to the amount that you're affected. But I'm going to have to take care of them because they will not know what to do. You should know what to do. Thank you.
Thank you. Just a quick comment. Out in the hallway, we do have 3 pamphlets that have been provided by the City of Milwaukee Health Department. The gentleman you referred to, is it Jose Rodriguez? Yes. And I ask you to take one of each of the 3. Another question. Michelle?
I appreciate it very much. I appreciate it very much.
Michelle's comment, if I may quickly summarize, Michelle, has to do with the fact that we did provide the link on the poster, the flyer for this event, that would allow individuals to find out whether their residence or their place of work was in the evacuation zone or the impact zone. She was asking if there were other information available that might be made available to the public to tell us where these other hazards travel, whether by road or rail. Is that correct? A map. Okay, thank you.
Any one of those routes that has a state highway designation is going to have trucks on it that occasionally carry hazardous materials. I just mentioned Capitol Drive because that's got a number on it. 76th Street has a number on it. Maybe, I don't know, but anyway, all over the county. So basically, I don't think that that anyone knows exactly what's traveling on those things at any point in time. I think that the fire department, and I know for a fact the county emergency management has locations of storage of all hazardous materials. They know exactly who has what and in what quantity. And those are the kind of things that I don't know that it's appropriate for everyone in the public to have that. I think it's appropriate for them to have that because not just people who are worried about, well, the bad guys may want to know where the diethyl trimethyl death is also.
I don't know if there's a map that exists. I mean, the federal government may have things like that. But I would tell you that in today's world, it's kind of like we've referred to a couple of times, it's all hazards to us. Some of the worst fires that we can face as a fire department, the most dangerous ones from a hazardous material standpoint, are a hardware store or a UPS truck where the quantities are smaller and it's not labeled. So it's everywhere. The fires burn hotter today because of the synthetics that are used in the lightweight construction and the new construction techniques. Collapse occurs earlier. People have less time to get out. It's, it's unfortunate, but part of it is progress. And there are bad things just about everywhere you go these days. And yes, there are certainly areas you might highlight in a community. You might have a distributor of chemicals. You might have a track that goes nearby where you know the product's being carried. But I can tell you, like Steve Fronk was alluding to on expressways, you don't know what's next to you in those tankers. And I'm not trying to make everybody paranoid. Normally it goes fine. That scenic train in Wauwatosa, we haven't had a problem since the late 1900s. And there's been derailments, but it's very infrequent because normally things work the way they're supposed to. But with that being said, we're here today so we can prepare for when they don't. So I wish I had a better answer for you, but my generic answer is you got to be aware of your surroundings no matter where you're at.
All hazardous materials are trucked over the road.
Say that loudly in the microphone.
Okay, I'll say that once more. 95% of all hazardous materials are shipped over the road. So there's 1 million gallons of crude going on one train. But it's the other 95% is on the highway and down Greenfield and National and 84th Street.
We received messages from Baldwin and Moore. Did we request or receive any response from Johnson or Sensenbrenner or Ryan?
We did not, I confess. Now, the reason Senator Baldwin was contacted was because she had been working on the FAST Act. So she was the person we went to. We do have an issue of contacting people who are running for office. She is not running for office. Mr. Johnson is running for office. So although Ms. Moore is running for office, she volunteered this, and we did receive it just this last week after we had received the message and the videotape from Senator Baldwin. So that's the sequence of events here. Yes.
Hi, my name is Elena Noyes. I'm with the League of Conservation Voters, and my question is for Representative Billings. And I was wondering about more of some of the comments that you received on your bill and what you hope to address during the working session this summer. I had the opportunity of working on supporting your bill with 2 other organizers and a number of volunteers. And I would say 90% of the people that we called in the districts that we're targeting were in massive support and would want to contact their elected officials to know that they support the bill as well. And so with that 90%, I mean, it's a very big number. And so I'm wondering what you hope to address. And when you propose a new legislation, I'd be more than happy to make those calls because we really enjoyed them.
Thank you very much. And I'd like your information at the end of this meeting. So there are a few fixes that we'd like to make on the bill. There are a couple areas where we refer to the DNR. It might be better to refer that to a different agency. We kind of spread out the funding for response to all cities along the railroad, along the lines, the railroad lines. And after talking with a lot of first responders, it felt like it was better to get more bang for our buck and focus on places where there's a tier 1 or tier 2 department already that has training. For example, in La Crosse, because Burlington Northern put that second track through, our city worked out a deal where we have a foam car, we have access to hazmat equipment. We've had special training in Colorado, also in Colorado, at the site where they do training for emergency response. And so when there was a derailment in Alma, La Crosse showed up. So there's some tweaks to the legislation. We recessed early this year. Unfortunately, we recessed in February. The Assembly may come in once more, possibly next week, but this is the earliest we've recessed since 1970. So I didn't know that we would be ending so quickly, so we just didn't have time to get the bill through and work on a couple amendments that we wanted to work on. So we will be bringing it back right away next year and with improvements. So stay in touch. And the public has made a difference on this bill. I mean, this is a bipartisan bill because both sides of the aisle were talked to by the people in their districts.
Thank you. One more question.
About the stabilizer, how open are the railroads or the crude oil people wanting to use that stabilizer? Because that seems to be that would be a pretty quick, easy way of controlling some of the danger without, because building tracks, et cetera, all takes time. If all you have to do is add some of this stabilizer, you would be cutting back on a lot of danger right away.
The stabilizers they're called inhibitors. Okay, an inhibitor, it stops something from going kind of crazy. Like an example would be my wife. She's my inhibitor. Okay, right? It's a good example. She keeps me from going crazy. The inhibitors, the rail company will do everything they can not to have bad press because they're in the business of making money. If they can put an inhibitor in something to make it safer, which they do a lot, they do. And I don't want to get into chemistry, but when I was telling you about other things that give me more concerned are things that are called polymers. Okay, that they have the capability of starting a self-reaction with themselves. They get shipped all the time with inhibitors. And this time of year, a train bridge will flood, it will wash out, and that train will sit there. And the CP, Union Pacific, they are right on top of sending crews out there where that train is stalled or can't get past the bridge that's washed out to get the inhibitors still in there because they wear out. Do you understand what I'm saying? They don't not want to put them in there. They try to every chance they get, and it just stops it. But it's not foolproof because they wear out. I mean, I can chemically explain that a lot better, but I think you get the gist.
What about the producer, though? What about putting it in at the point of?
And that's who's responsible for the inhibitor, is where it's created, because they want it to travel safely.
So in the oil fields, this should be put in before it's put in the rail cars?
It all depends on what kind of crude it is, ma'am. There's not just one kind of crude that comes out. There's heavy crude, sweet crude, sour crude, and it all depends on the properties that's in them. The crude that we're talking about, the Balkan that really has made the news, is a real sweet crude. And what that means in layman's terms is it catches on fire really easy, okay? Why it doesn't sit well in the tanks is it's corrosive. Regular crude oil, the oil in your car is not corrosive. This stuff, it's corrosive. The tanks are a little bit older. The corrosivity, they're not really designed for that, because a lot of the tanks that carry corrosives have like a plastic lining. These have metal linings, and the corrosivity of it eats through it. Okay, so they try to balance that out when they ship it, but it can't be done because each batch that comes out is a little bit different. They have similar qualities, but it's not a constant across the whole oil field. You can have a different crude that comes from this well than this well. So, I mean, they do the best they can. They really do not want problems, and they try to fix it.
So that means that the cars that have exploded and caught on fire, there were inhibitors that were not effective?
I can't answer that, ma'am. I do not know. All I know is when the car comes off the track and the product comes out of the container, the sweet crude is way more flammable than we're used to. And it gives off those vapors, and it's not the crude that burns, it's the vapors that come off the crude, and it finds an ignition source, and then it starts on fire. And they don't always explode. It's usually a fire. The tanks are low-pressure tanks. They're designed to spill. So, because if they don't spill and the product stays inside, then it's a bomb. And it's not designed for that. It's designed to spill because it's better to have a spill than a bomb. I mean...
Well, this is an interesting ending to this event. I would like to just call your attention again to our host, the UW-Milwaukee School of Freshwater Sciences. We greatly appreciate the use of this room and the equipment in this room. And also to Media, which is recording this program. We will have this program posted on our league website, at least a link to it so that you can get to it at Media. And I would also like to thank our presenters, Brian Chiu, Eric Hansen, Jill Billings, Chief Ugaste, Russell Rivard, Captain, right? And Mr. Fronk, having come here today to inform us about this issue. And I would also like to thank the league members who pitched in to make this an event that we all can take home and learn from. The Natural Resources Committee, I will not go through their names, Ann Bainton, Brian, and so forth. Membership Committee, we have a great membership committee here, and they are the gracious women who welcomed you and asked you to sign in as you came. The two people who are on the communications team who helped with the flyer and the online materials that we will have and do have on the league website. Peggy and Terry are both out of the city, the area. And to my husband, Dave Petering, who got a couple of his graduate students to come here and help today. So thank you very much, and I thank you all very much for coming. One last comment. When you came in on your chair, there were two sheets. One of them has the website, our league website on it, and other league oil train resources. So please use this to inform yourself. The backside has the bio sketches of our presenters, and the other sheet has a brief summary of the Legislative Reference Bureau's take on the bill that Jill Billings introduced, AB 552. So please take those and find the City of Milwaukee Emergency Preparedness Bulletins out on the table in the hall. Thank you again.
An MCM production.